We're on. Very good. Thank you. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Christina Strassfield, and I'm the Executive Director of the Southampton Arts Center. On behalf of our staff and board, we want to welcome you today. We're so excited that this is the last of 4 talks that we had, public programs, with East End Collected 8. This has been an amazing exhibition with 28 fantastic artists in it. Some of you have been here before, and if you are, I apologize, but it's very important that you hear from Patton Miller, who originated the idea of the East End Collected exhibition, to give you a little information of how it came about and how we are doing it now.
I want to thank everybody for coming, and in that this is the last talk that we're going to have, I want to thank Christina and the board of the Southampton Arts Center and everybody who works here, including my lovely wife, right over there, because it's a team effort, and thank you all for coming. Well, this whole thing started 11 years ago when the Parish Art Museum moved to Watermill. And this building sat empty, and it's owned by the village, if you don't know that. And there was a meeting at a house in Southampton of concerned citizens about what to do with this place. It was not a given that it would be an art center. So I was invited as the artist to give my opinion, and in fact, I was the first one asked to stand up and say what I thought. And what I said to them was very quick, was that in order to survive as an art center, you have to be loved. Now, how do you do that? You do that by reflecting all the artists that live out here. And they called me up about 2 months later and said, do it. And I thought it would be a one-and-done show. And it turned out that we did 4 consecutively annually, and then we went to a biannual schedule. So that's it. That's it in a nutshell. But I want to thank you all for coming, and let's start the proceedings.
I just want to say also that you've showcased, and including this show, over 350 artists from the community, which is fantastic, a great opportunity. All works are for sale as well, so if anyone is interested, you can look for them. You can speak to the receptionist, or you can also look online. We're always thrilled to have sales for both the artist and for the Southampton Arts Center. I do want to also thank Patton, because when I came 2 years ago, and Patton said, well, let's help me out with the installation, and we did that together, and it was such a wonderful collaboration, and I'm delighted that we were able to work as co-curators for this exhibition, so thank you.
Igualmente.
So what we're going to do is we're going to have each of the artists talk for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to open it, Pat and I will ask them questions, and then we're going to open it up to the public for questions as well. So I'm going to start with Brendan Johnson. Brendan is an amazing artist. He's a sculptor, he's a painter, he works in oil, he works in watercolor. He sort of blows me away because I feel like he's the Renaissance artist. He does it all, and he does it all amazingly well. So Brendan?
Well, thank you so much, and I wanted to thank both of you before getting started, and the staff of the SAC. This has been an incredible show and an incredible experience, and I know it's an enormous amount of work putting these things together, so thank you on behalf of myself and all the other artists. So anyway, my name is Brendan Johnston. As Christina mentioned, I have the 3 stone carvings and the painting of the sort of curious woman who stares you down when you walk in the front door. So I grew up in Manhattan and out here during the summers. I was interested in art from a very early age, more in appreciating it rather than actually making it, curiously. And I ended up being an art history major in college, and I couldn't get to each class fast enough. And then junior year in college, I did a semester abroad in Florence. And that experience really kind of fundamentally altered my life. I remember I walked into Michelangelo's Medici Chapel. Kind of broke my brain in a way. And I don't know that I've quite recovered. It kind of did something to me and expanded my thinking. That semester being exposed to other works, made from the early Renaissance by Simone Martini through, Venus of Urbino. And then I also specifically remember having a very, very deep potent reaction to Caravaggio's Entombment in Rome. And I'm not necessarily a religious person, but if you kind of replace the word religion with art, I'm a deeply religious person. So anyway, after that, after I graduated, I was really curious. I sort of thought, I want to participate in this language, the sort of inexplicable language that is art, or figurative art more specifically. And I found a small school that was called Grand Central Academy. It was, used to be in Midtown. Now it's moved out to Brooklyn, and they teach, I studied anatomy, draftsmanship, drawing from life, painting from life, and sculpture as well, and portraiture. I had a great, excuse me, portrait sculptor teacher. I met my wife there. And after we graduated, we did sort of something that's a little bit of a lost tradition, but we did the grand tour. We went back to Italy and actually worked in museums, copying old master paintings and drawing from sculptures. And the American Academy in Rome, where we were staying, kind of can pull strings for certain artists that are residents there. So they got us, say, into the Borghese Villa, and I was able to draw from a Bernini on a Monday, when the museum is closed. And if there's heaven on earth for me, that's it, a little bit. So after that, we moved out here, and I mainly worked on landscape painting and portraiture. But there was this itch that I never had gotten to scratch, and that was stone carving. I've been so curious about it because that's sort of where antiquity came from. My mother-in-law actually bought me a chisel and said, go learn to stone carve. So I took her recommendation and I found a guy who lives in Brooklyn, Steve Shaheen. He had learned how to stone carve in Siena from one of these sixth or 10th generation Italian stone carvers. So he showed me the ropes, brought me over to Carrara, sort of taught me the basic skills. I worked for him in his studio in Brooklyn. And then he has a small stone carving school in a stone fabrication warehouse here on Long Island. And when I went and visited that, it's a warehouse of all these stone slabs, beautiful pieces of stone sourced from throughout the world. And each one of them, I was looking at them, they're magnificent abstract paintings done by nature. And I had this sort of thought, can you paint on stone? Can I do oil paintings on stone? Wouldn't that be interesting? And then, of course, the earliest known forms of paintings were done on stone, the cave paintings in Lascaux. So past 5 years, I've been doing stone carvings in unusual stones, and I've been doing paintings on stone panels, which is sort of the stage I'm at. And so as far as these pieces go, the three stone carvings are called eidolons. To the Greeks, an eidolon was not exactly a ghost, but an apparition, a spirit, like an idealized spirit of a person that was either living or dead. So you could see someone you knew in a different place where they weren't. It was believed that apparitions could be around. And for me, that kind of felt like what portraiture is in a way. It's a stand-in for the person. It's not them, but it's a form of them. And for this, especially when they're done in unusual stones, they kind of have a little bit of a ghostly quality. So that's sort of how those pieces developed. And then the painting is of Pandora. I'm interested in myths, not just Greek myths, but myths from all cultures, and they're interesting. They change and fluctuate over time, and they reflect the society that they're from. They're not truths, they're our stories, and as much as we think maybe, or sometimes I think we've moved beyond myths, but we still participate in our own mythology enormously. I mean, look at what some of the things that come out of Hollywood, storylines that I love and am fascinated in. But anyway, I was reading the book Pandora's Jar by Natalie Haynes, and she was revisiting early Greek mythology to see how it started and how certain mythologies changed. And it resonated with me because I'm sort of trying to revisit classical, not classical art per se, but figurative art and how it's changed as well. And so the myth of Pandora she was originally all giving. No, what was it? Sorry. She was all giving and all gifted, or also a gift to all. And it wasn't until later generations, Hesiod and generations of the misogyny, that thought, well, if she's giving us the good stuff, she's probably also giving us all the bad stuff too. And so she turned into the releaser of sins and evil upon man. So I wanted to go back to the origin of who she was at the moment of creation, before, social aims changed her storyline, and so that's sort of where that piece came from.
Thank you. And I know that you're working on mosaics now?
Yes. So a little bit of a logical conclusion of looking at so much really good Italian art. And also, I've been looking at Klimt quite a bit. Klimt was very, very influenced by classics and Greek artwork. And a lot of his paintings are influenced by the mosaics from northwestern Italy, up in Venice. And so my most recent pieces, I've been inlaying mosaics into the sort of stone panels. Very luckily, the stone panels I found, it's a discontinued product, but they're about 5 millimeters thick, the stone panels. And most mosaics, at least the ones that come from Mexico, are 5 millimeters thick too, so they kind of lay in beautifully.
What do you use for glue?
It's called Weld Bond. It's what's recommended by the mosaicists, at least on YouTube.
Thank you, Brendan.
We look forward to seeing those.
I suggest you all study his work closely. It's phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Next, we have Nishan Kazazian, and Nishan is a trained architect and has been working as an artist for many, many years. He teaches as well. I met him probably about 5 or 6 years ago. 10 years ago, it seems like. Before everything pre-COVID, it's like a blur. But again, I was just fascinated because, again, talking with him about art is so engaging, and I found so rewarding. So again, Nishan.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina. Well, actually, my first master's was, I was a Bachelor of Fine Arts, then Master's of Fine Arts, then Master's Architecture. But anyway, so, hi, I am Nishan Kazazian. First, a warm thank you to Christina Stressfeld and Patton Miller for curating such an expansive and inclusive exhibition, bringing together artists from diverse styles and perspectives. Bringing together artists from diverse styles and perspectives. I also want to acknowledge my fellow panelists for their insight and presence today. Thank you. I am an artist, architect, and educator. I am American, Lebanese, Armenian, born in Beirut and based in US for over 50 years. I studied at Columbia University and currently live and work between New York City and East Hampton. I practice art and architecture and teach at Parsons School of Design. My work has been exhibited and presented both in the US and internationally. At the heart of my practice is the intersection of art and architecture, a space where memory, material, and environment shape how we belong, how we remember, and how we imagine what's next. Much of my work navigates transformation, layered histories, and speculative futures. Let me start with Radiance Vessels, a series of plexiglass works that explore emotional complexity, tension, and metamorphosis. These pieces reflect on the states of belongings and estrangement, while responding to broader concerns from ecological fragility to forgotten narratives. Working with layered plexiglass allows me to engage with light, shadow, and transparency. These qualities become metaphors for the hidden, the intersecting, and unresolved. Breaking and reassembling components becomes a symbol of resilience and endurance, speaking to cycles of rupture and renewal that echo personal and collective transformation. Another piece, Resonant Timelines, is a wood construction that explores the relationship between time, memory, and imagined continuity. I work with wood veneer, material that's both delicate and enduring, using its natural grain to trace embedded stories. The surface becomes a record, a memory field, holding layers of passage and perseverance. Then there are my animated works, which I call Unfolding Futures Imagined. These are not just videos. They are speculative blueprints transforming artistic imagination into adaptive potential. In a time of ecological urgency, I believe art can transcend representation and propose new ways of being. One animation, The Revelatory City of Dreams, envisions a utopian city where art, architecture, and ecology converge. Spaces designed for both emotional resonance and environmental responsiveness. Aeolian Variations responds to wind and atmospheric change. It's an evolving form, generating sound, energy, and movement, merging natural rhythms with technological poetics. And Barriers Reimagined proposes sculptural forms that double as erosion buffers and energy-producing surfaces, while also offering spaces for gathering, reflection, and play. Across all these works, my hope is to invite deep engagement, a space for dreaming, remembering, and reimagining, where art becomes more than object. It becomes a vessel for renewal. All this brings to mind a quote from Freud: "Dreams are often most profound when they seem most crazy." That line has stayed with me because I believe bold, unruly imagination has the power to take us beyond what's known toward new, necessary horizons. Unfolding Futures Imagined as both a title and a guiding idea invites us to dream boldly, think deeply, and envision a world where artistic and environmental imagination come together and art becomes life. It asks us to see art not only as reflection, but as a generative act of imagining new worlds. In summary, my personal experience is shared by histories often associated with complex geopolitical narratives, but my work resists being confined by borders, whether national, cultural, or conceptual. Pain, loss, and healing are universal experiences. Having lived in the US for over 50 years, my perspective has expanded across emotional, intellectual, and lived time. My art speaks to all forms of suffering and rejuvenation across time and space. It allows me to create spaces, real or imagined, where these emotions can be lived, processed, and transformed. I am drawn to speculative technologies as a way to explore where our existential conditions merge with open pathways towards futures imagined. That's why I consider my work global, deeply human, and oriented toward what is yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you. As with all the artists, I do hope that you're going to go back and look at their work in depth. But I think with Nishan's work, I think you really do have to watch the videos and really absorb all of the things that he's just mentioned. So I really welcome that. Susan is next. I met Susan probably about 2 years ago when I first came to the Art Center, and she was recommended by a number of people. And so I had the pleasure of going to her studio. I must admit that I was overwhelmed because she's done so many different styles and so many different amazing works that it was very hard to choose, but these particular works really spoke to me. So Susan?
Which brings me to a topic I'd like to discuss. Well, first of all, thank you both.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you both for the opportunity to be in this show. I feel very honored and surrounded by extraordinary artists. Can I ask you, pronounce your name for me?
Nishan Kazazian.
Okay, we'll go with Nishan. Like Nishan, most artists, I think, wear two hats, at least two hats. It would be ideal to just focus on one's art, but most of us have a side job, a side gig, something else going on. For me, it was interior decorating and construction management. And while for a very long time I didn't see any correlation between my two hats or my two selves, I happen to be a Gemini, so that makes sense anyway, it all begins to come together. My passion for furniture, my passion for antiques, my passion for grand English country houses. As Christina said, I'm kind of all over the place. And I felt guilty for that for a very long time until I read an article, kind of recently, I think it was in the New Yorker. And the article was on Susan Rothenberg. I don't know if most of you know her work, but she has been referred to as a polyglot. Sounds pretty, well, it sounds pretty odd, but the definition of a polyglot is somebody who speaks different languages or speaks multiple languages. Taking that thought and moving it over to the art world and saying, okay, I don't have to feel guilty for painting non-representational work and then all of a sudden doing something super realistic. It's all in my head, and it all comes out without a whole lot of explanation. I travel down a series, and when I get to the end of the series, something says to me, stop on that series, pursue something else. And so in one of the pieces hanging today up on the wall, I've incorporated the Great American Songbook. Why? Because I love music from the 50s and 60s. How it ended up in the collage, I can't really explain, but then who can really explain how they get to where they're going? I mean, it's just what you do. I love music, I love MGM musicals. I don't have to feel guilty about that anymore. I can go there if I want to. The pieces that are hanging are comprised, they're collages. Most of the work I do is collage work. Most of the work I do is on paper. Those pieces have wallpaper samples in them because I spent a lot of time in the D&D building getting wallpaper samples. I understand fabric. I love fabric. I incorporate it into my paintings. Fashion is something else I adore, particularly fashion of the Dior, Balenciaga era. And I've painted lots of paintings, full-size fashion paintings, a little esoteric, I understand, maybe I was born too late for the era in which I have great passion. Maybe not. I think I have some quotes. I don't really want to go into them because that is kind of esoteric, but you can only create in the generation in which you are born. To attempt to do something different, well, I can be challenged on that by anybody, but I dare say, I'll take the risk of saying, very difficult. It's very difficult to do something that you haven't felt since your childhood. It's easier to express in music than it is perhaps in painting, but you can think about that. If you were a child of, as I am, a child of the 50s and 60s, so that you're spanning, if you will, Frank Sinatra to Motown, you can't dance in a different rhythm. You can't create, you're not attracted to music of a different rhythm. And I think the same holds true in art. When you try to create and force something that isn't of your blood, you're not being true to your spirit. Anyway, I'm rambling. I think I've covered everything I needed to say about where my art comes from.
Okay. Do you want to?
Alan Wexler is our next speaker. Alan, when I first saw your work, two things occurred to me was archaeology and Sisyphus. You want to explain those?
Sure. Again,
Am I crazy?
no, absolutely not. Thank you, both Patton and Christina, for inviting me to be part of this. I'm one of the few North Fork artists here today represented in this exhibition. A little backstory. When my wife and I would go to a cocktail party and someone would ask me what I did for a living, I would be confused as to how to answer that question. And then sometimes I would say I'm an artist, and people would ask me what kind of medium did I use, and I say, well, my medium is architecture. And then sometimes I'd say I'm an architect. Do you build what kind of houses do you build? I say, well, I don't really build houses. My work is more speculative and experimental than that. So that, I got kind of flustered, and then my wife got angry at me and said, you need to have an elevator pitch to tell people what you do for a living. So I went back to my studio the next day, and I wrote 20 business cards, which I keep in my wallet. And when people ask me that awkward question, what do you do for a living, I pull out one random card from my wallet. So I'll just read a few of them.
I want you to read all of them.
Oh, no, I don't think I'll do that, but they are on my website, so you're welcome to go there. Alan Wexler, cocktail party response number 7. What kind of work do you do? The poetics of space inspires my work. I agree with Bachelard. There is a difference between the attic and the cellar. I study light under the guidance of Virginia Woolf. William Morris points to the beauty in faded colors and decay. George Perec encourages me to continue my research into the infraordinary. With Sir James Fraser, I study ritual and ceremony. Italo Calvino lifts me into the treetops so that I could observe the world. Nicholson Baker encourages me to look closely. William Letheby teaches me about magic. Le Corbusier convinces me to experiment with the non-functional. D.T. Suzuki helps me to stop thinking so much, and John Cage asks me to be silent. Alan Wexler, cocktail party response number 14. What kind of work do you do? I'm an architect in an artist's body. My studio is a laboratory. I sculpt with gravity and heat. I paint with rain. I use everyday and ordinary activities, eating, sleeping, and bathing, as media. I investigate the built world archaeologically. My work looks at simple things. the sight line between two people sitting across from each other at a table, the many positions of two bricks in relationship to each other, how floor meets wall. My work defines habitable space and the wall that separates inside from outside. I invent ways to walk through walls. Alan Wexler, cocktail party response number 20. My work explores the other side of function, the poetry of chair, table, cup, floor, nut, and bolt. I want the second floor to challenge gravity and for the staircase to ascend from the grave. I want windows to become eyes filtering and transforming the world outside. I want to become a different person on the other side of the door. I want to read a door. I want to believe in a wall. I want to have a conversation with a chair. I want a corridor to be a symphony, to tell a story. I want a corridor to have a beginning and an end. I want the corridor to be endless and to have an end. I want a faucet to become a waterfall. I want a light bulb to carve away the darkness. Should we do one more?
Those were all very long elevator rides.
How about one more? Number 18. What do you do what kind of work do you do? I struggle to build buildings, furniture, and utensils that effortlessly dissolve into memories, emotions, and subconscious conversations. A sky blue dining room ceiling to encourage daydreaming. An upholstered chair to comfort in a motherly embrace. A coffee cup to connect a New Yorker to Kyoto. Gaston Bachelard in the Poetics of Space. Wait a minute, where am I? Poetics of Space, of the warmth of architectural space when it is cold outside. Virginia Woolf, in The Moment, describes the interior brightening as dusk as the sky daylight dims. I read Orhan Pamuk's Museum of Innocence and hear the sounds of Istanbul, feel the softness of the carpets, savor the taste of Rocky, and climb the stairs to the Merrimack apartment. I want my built works to be as transcendent as these texts. One last thing. Cocktail party response number 11. What kind of work do you do? I was exposed to contemporary art as a student at the Rhode Island School of Design in the late 60s. Andy Warhol's initials, AW, were the same as mine. Alan Wexler, AW. This coincidence was too amazing to ignore. I wanted to become the Andy Warhol of architecture.
Alan, you didn't answer my question.
What was the question?
The archaeology in Sisyphus.
Absolutely. No, I did. I did answer
Okay.
that.
I guess it went past me.
I've solved the problem of Sisyphus. It's out there. I think there's one out there.
There is.
Which is an attempt to keep the ball from rolling down the hill.
Right, you have
I think
strings.
we can do that as artists and designers.
There's strings attached to the ball.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's technology at work.
And the archaeology. I mean, you dig into your canvases.
I do, and I actually excavate into an actual physical landscape, plaster landscape, and I excavate.
Yeah.
I move earth into the sky, and then I photograph those sculptural landscapes, and then I carve into the drawings and the photographs, and I scrape the surface, and I rework the surface, and until it becomes a mythical image.
That's what I love about your work.
Thank you. So
Alan?
I make images like I make furniture. I polish and buff them, and
But no cushions.
I varnish them
No cushions.
sometimes.
Okay.
Alan, when I was at Guildhall, when we did Swept Away, you did a performance piece
Yes.
on the beach.
Yeah.
And I remember you were saying, well, I haven't really done performance before, but you did an amazing piece.
Thank you.
Do you want to describe that
Yeah,
to
that's
the audience?
great. Oh, I love that project because I was reluctant to do it because I'm not much of a performer. I like the privacy of my studio despite this audience here. But that piece was, in East Hampton, I think through Guildhall, when
Yes.
you were director, you invited artists from East End to collaborate with artists from LA, East meets West. And you set me up with a performance artist in LA. It was wonderful. He sent me a prompt, which was a short videotape, a film that he produced, where there was a fabric, rolled fabric, that washed up against the shore in, I guess, Santa Monica. And so I took and I built a canvas bag, and in the canvas bag was a kit of parts to make a series of different kinds of rakes to rake the sand. My work is very influenced by Japanese tea ceremony and traditional Japanese architecture, and to some extent with Zen Buddhism, and raking the dry garden, if you know of Ryo-Anji, and the idea of the dry garden, which is a meditative space. It's a space of a garden that you don't, how do you enter without destroying the raked sand? How do you exit it? So I created a dry garden on the beach in East Hampton and assembled the rake, and the dry garden consisted of 3 obstructions. One was a blue towel, a blue cooler, and a blue beach chair. Because at the Ryo-Anji, there are stones that are obstructing the movement of the Zen monk when they rake the garden. So I had to rake in relationship to these 3 obstructions on the beach. So that's how that happened.
Do you want to ask your question about whether their parents wanted them to be artists?
Yeah, that's a question I ask. As a group, would you raise your hands if your parents were really excited that you were going to be artists?
What was that?
Wow.
I didn't
Wow.
question. I didn't get
There's 3 lucky ones. Yeah.
I think we do.
Sometimes I ask this question and the parents are in the audience. That's a little awkward.
Architecture is okay, not art.
Alan, you didn't raise your hand.
What's that? No, I didn't.
He did.
Yeah.
No, I didn't raise my hand. I think my parents would have been disappointed if I entered into being an artist. So it was okay to become an architect.
Oh,
That was a
right.
legitimate profession for
That's why-
first-generation Jews who came to this country,
That's why you did it.
Eastern Europe.
In my case, I didn't pay attention what they said.
I could get away with
I did
being
what I
an
wanted to do.
architect.
My parents were very excited about it because it was getting me out of the water. It was the one thing I was surfing.
Oh.
And I dropped out of high school and got a GED, and then I wanted to go to art school, and they said, good, something. So you see, I presented such low expectations.
I had kind of an unusual, extraordinary good luck with my parents. So I went through sort of the education I went through wasn't, as I think I mentioned, very supportive of the arts. It was these kids are going to be really good bankers and lawyers. And so in a way, the scholastic system discouraged me from being an artist. All the way through college, I went to a college that didn't have a fine art program, oddly. And shockingly, my parents were actually encouraging me to drop out because they saw that I was trying to do something that my brain wasn't meant to do. And I was really lucky. My mother, who grew up in New York, her father died, and she lived in Paris for years, so she really saw a lot of Europe. And back in the 60s and 70s, before many people could afford to go see the cultural works over there. And so she looked at me and she said, go be an artist. So I'm one of the few blessed people to have parents who kind of back them.
Bless her, huh? Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful thing when the parents support the kids instead of making them feel bad about their choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my first work, actually, when I was in high school, I was like in actually elementary school. I started doing like these unusual sculptures in clay, and sort of they encouraged, but at the same time, they were puzzled what I was doing. But as I grew up further, as I went, and I just did more, I don't think they ever told me not to do it, but it was kind of a very puzzling like a situation. They didn't encourage, but they didn't make me stop it. So I ended up doing what I wanted to do.
But you became an architect.
You did well.
Yeah.
Did well. My mother's advice was, I'm delighted you want to be an artist. I always was an artist, but you got to earn a living. So the side gig was go be a teacher. Teach art if you want, but earn a living. So I think we're from the same generation. So
Yeah.
the first generation goes to college, Jewish, 1960s.
Yeah, I was born in 49, so 1949.
I was born in, I'm not sure.
So I think we're about the...
It's about the same.
Same
Give or
basic.
take. Yeah.
But my parents were very proud of what I did in the end, and although I didn't practice architecture, they were proud of what I did. So I must say they were encouraging. So I don't want to diss them in that way. But one of the highlights of their, I think, I once was published in a book called Unbuilt America, and I was right next to Frank Lloyd Wright. It was a lighting scheme for the World Trade Center, so that made them feel good.
Good. So I think at this point, we'll open it up to the audience if anyone has a question that they'd like to ask any of the artists. Must be somebody.
So thank you, everybody. And my question, is for all of you, since there's East End in the title, how has the East End, the landscape, your everyday life here affected you? And would there be any of your work you couldn't have done if you had not been here, but somewhere completely different?
Great question.
Sure, so I'll start.
Can you repeat the question?
So I grew up coming out here during summers. My wife and I now live here year-round, and we love it. We've been out year-round for a little while. But my father was a writer, and he mainly loved reading. He was a writer, but mainly just wanted to read, sit in the living room and read. But he spent a huge amount of time in the Rogers Memorial Library, which used to be next door. And I think my mother forced him to take us, me and my brothers, with him, but we got bored at the library, so he would let us play outside in the yard amongst all of the emperors. The Caesars. And I remember looking up at Augustus and kind of being like, what world is he from? And kind of intrigued by that. And then also just this building. Correct me if I'm wrong, Christina, but these are plaster copies of the frieze from the Parthenon?
Parthenon, absolutely.
That Sam Parrish, I believe, purchased when he was over there. And so from a young age, I've been coming in when this was the Parrish Museum and seeing these and being affected by them. And there's a sort of a little bit of a beautiful through line. I don't know, what's to say how I'm influenced, but the stone carvings I made are done through the same process that these friezes were originally made. These are plasters, but the originals in stone were made made in red clay, and then the clay would dry. I'm not sure if they fired them or not, and then they would use a pointing system, at least according to the Acropolis Museum. I didn't know that. I thought that pointing was originated in the 17th century, but apparently these were created through the pointing process from the clay to the marble, and that's how I made my stone carvings. They're first made in terracotta from life, and then through the pointing process transferred into stone. So there is some sort of beautiful through line that I do believe has affected me.
Does anyone else want to interject on that topic? No?
I didn't quite get the question to
How has being here influenced the work that you've done or haven't done?
being in
The East End.
Okay. Well, yes. When we were looking for a house, it was late, I guess, 90s, and we went all over, and then we went also Woodstock, and then I said to Jack, I said, no, we are going to East End because of the light.
Yeah.
I felt the light had such an impact on me. And when I work in my small studio here, and one of the most fascinating time is I work at night until morning when the light comes, and that's what gives me more energy, more time. So the light in East End is a fascinating, and the reflection of the water bodies and the whole thing, and in the early morning going to the beach and just looking at the horizon, an ending horizon, it gives me tremendous inspiration to continue my work.
I would mention the light is quite fantastic. It has no effect whatever on my work. I could work with the shades drawn and it wouldn't matter. The light does wonderful things to my soul, no question, but it has no effect on the art. I'd like to think, though, that it's kind of a small world out here. Everybody says it's Manhattan, moved 100 miles away. There's an intimacy, there's an ease. Artists gather together, they talk stuff. It's a lot easier to do it out here than it is to do it in Manhattan. I mean, Manhattan is quite different today than it was when I started out. I don't even know it anymore in that same sense. But out here is home in that you have people around you. You can discuss technique. You can discuss supplies. You can be rapturous about the hardware store. I mean, you could do anything. But it's small town in lots of ways. And that's what I love about it.
For me, it was when I was working between New York and on the North Fork. When my kids got out of school in May, we would move out here for 3 months for the entire summer, and I would literally take apart my table saw and put it in the back of our car, and we had a rooftop rack, and I'd take all my tools and move them between New York and out here. So it was kind of a seamless connection between Long Island and Chelsea, where we lived for so many years. It was seamless, but I have a smaller space in New York than I did out here, so the size of the space. And also when I was in the city, most of the work at that time were more speculative, kind of architectural, conceptual work that was about urban space and urban issues, whether it was a lighting scheme for the World Trade Center by turning on and off lights in the facade of the towers, or proposals about using billboards as wayfinding devices. And when I came out here, I guess the work became more landscape-oriented, more about earth and sky. So I think it did influence the work in the end, as mostly the newer work is related to the nature of excavation and moving into the earth and lifting earth into the sky and defying gravity in that way.
Mention the first piece you did out there, you had no tools invented and
Oh, yeah.
stones.
Yeah, it was an important piece. I remember we rented a small cottage on an inlet in Mattituck, Long Island, before we purchased our place in Southold. And I was working on a series of small buildings that were based on stream of consciousness, where I would create a miniature lumberyard, making miniature 2x4s, sheets of plywood, sheets of glass, sheets of concrete, and I made this miniature lumberyards, and then I would accrete these buildings at this scale. I call them temple houses. And then when I came out here, I brought that miniature lumberyard out here, and I started collecting black beach stones, white beach stones that were, and I somehow incorporated the beach stones into the miniature lumberyard, which became kind of props and scaffolding for these beach stones, which then later on became table lamps and floor lamps based on the same idea, with a light bulb encrusted in a scaffolding of linear elements. So that was beginning of my Beachstone experience. And then when I was teaching, always taught, one of the early projects I used to do is give my students a Beachstone and have them create a series of containers for that Beachstone out of chipboard, which is the typical material architects use to build models of buildings. So chipboard containers for Beachstones, and so on. So there was a lot of that kind of
I think that the artist community here, though, is a very strong community, all across. And Patton and I have probably been here out on the East End for the longest periods of time. And the community has changed, but I think it's still a very supportive community of one another. So again, just think within a small radius, we have the Southampton Arts Center, we have the Southampton Cultural Center, we have the Southampton African American Museum, we have the Southampton Historical Society, we have the Parish Art Museum. So this is all within a 3-mile radius where art is celebrated, and we are so thrilled to be here in this community, exactly. I do want to thank our mayor, who's here right now, because we just had our roof redone, and we don't have any leaks in the building. On a day like this, in the past, we did have some problems, and it's such a pleasure to be here with all of you here and not have that happen. So thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Please come and talk to the artists. Some of the other artists are here who are part of the show, so thank you for coming. Do support the arts. Do support the Southampton Arts Center. If you can become a member, that's wonderful. If you could follow us on our Instagram and our social media, Instagram and Facebook. Follow all of the artists. You're going to learn so much, and you'll enjoy the process. Thank you again.
Now can you fix my phone?
oh yeah.